The VANCESLIDE is coming for the 2028 presidential election, with J.D. Vance being the favorite to win the Republican primary for president, and with Gavin Newsom being the favorite to win the Democrat primary, with AOC in a near second place. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. Looking at my modeling for the 2028 election, we can clearly see that Vance has an electoral advantage against incumbent Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom has been a historically unpopular figure in national polling and would be set to lose to Vance in a pretty big loss in a 2028 matchup. Looking at the 2024 presidential election, incumbent President Donald Trump, back then President-elect Donald Trump, won the Rust Belt states and was able to secure 312 electoral college votes against, at the time, incumbent Vice President Kamala Harris. He was even able to get states like New Jersey and Virginia into the lean Democrat column just below 6 points. And so this spells disaster for the Democrat Party as a whole. And what's very interesting is that when a vice presidential candidate or the same party typically tends to win in some of these circumstances, it would only make sense for Vance to have to improve in the electoral college. The same map has never occurred in United States election history. You've never had the exact same election result happen twice. And so if Vance were to win, he'd hypothetically have to pick up an extra state in the following election. And so looking at the safe Republican states, we have Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska, including the 1st Congressional District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Alaska, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, Missouri, and South Carolina, as well as Maine's 2nd Congressional District. This will now be in the safe Republican column at a 15-point win compared to the 9-point victory that it was back in the 2024 election. This will put Vance at about 126 safe electoral votes, but we have more safe states to add into this column. The state of Iowa is about a 15-point win, exactly a 14.7 percentage point win for J.D. Vance against Gavin Newsom. In the last election, it was about a 13-point win, and that was in the safe column, so it'll continue to move slightly to the right, and it will stay in the safe column. Ohio was an 11-point victory in the last cycle, but we actually see here it is a 17.5-point win for incumbent Vice President J.D. Vance in this election, so that'll be in the safe Republican column as well. So Ohio will actually vote to the right of Iowa by a couple points in this one. We see the state of Texas at a 17.9 percentage point margin of victory for J.D. Vance. So he'd improve from Donald Trump's 13.7 percentage point win. He'd probably make even more gains in the southern border area. That is where I would suspect that be the case. We can clearly see here that, Donald Trump managed to flip Tarrant County. He managed to flip Williamson into his column, and Fort Bend was pretty competitive. I'd expect Vance to flip Dimmick County into his column. I think he'd get Jim Hoggs and Brooks pretty competitive. Even Harris, Texas would probably be a toss-up county in that next election. So very interesting to see that play out the way it did. Now, in the state of Florida, Vance is expected to have a 19-point win in this forecast. Hispanic voters are shifting massively to the right in this forecast. He is expected to do very well with Hispanics, essentially only lose them by 2 points nationwide. Donald Trump lost them by about 10 to 15 points, depending on the survey that you look at. And so this would be a huge change from even the last cycle, where he'd do even better with Hispanic voters. Looking at the safe Democrat states, we have the following. We have California, Oregon, Washington. These are still in the safe column. We can see Oregon just at the 12-point mark. It was about a 14-point win in the last election. And by the way, in Florida, Vance would probably be flipping Palm Beach. He'd get Broward pretty close. I'd even think he'd potentially almost flip Orange County in that scenario, and he'd probably get the county where UF is to be pretty competitive. So that's where I think he'd get those like pretty impressive wins. And I think Miami-Dade would probably be closer to like a 20-point win in 2028 if he's really winning by 19 points on the map. And so, Oregon just above, the 12-point mark. It was a 14-point win last time, but again, the college white vote is actually a little bit more Democrat than what it was in 2024. Vance is just improving with non-college whites a little bit, and Vance is making huge gains with, Hispanic, Black, and Asian voters to the point where, even though some of these states won't move, Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Florida will continue to move in the Republican direction. We even see, Vermont, Massachusetts. Maryland is one that is very interesting because this one is way closer. It's only a 19-point win in this forecast, and it's mainly because the black vote shifts really hard into the Republican column. Vance gains quite substantially, and so that's why you're seeing that margin of victory for Gavin in the state of Maryland. And when you look at the safe states for him, besides Maine's first, congressional district, which is about almost a 20-point win here, it's really not even a lot of safe states. Hawaii, you could probably say, is still there, but it's only a 14-point win as opposed to a 23-point win. So that's another 9-point shift. And it shifted 6 points this time. So for Vance to win in a landslide, for Hawaii to shift another 9 points isn't exactly out of the question for the GOP. And so when you look at all the safe states, Vance clearly has an electoral advantage here. And you see all of the toss-ups would be Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. Now, Connecticut, I actually think, even Connecticut falls short of below of the safe margin. Even Connecticut falls below. But we're going to start with the safe Republican, or the likely Republican states. North Carolina, a 9.9 percentage point win. Donald Trump won the state, 3 different times. And it used to be more Republican back in the early 2000s. It then flipped in 2008 very suddenly, a 12-point shift into Obama's favor due to the black vote. And I think with Vance gaining quite substantially with that vote, on top of improving with non-college whites and Hispanics, I actually think Vance could probably push this margin of victory pretty high. I also have Georgia as a 7.6 percentage point win. So again, Vance is winning the popular vote by about like 4 points here. So that's why you'd see such a big, win there. And I actually think that Gavin Newsom's campaign would probably put less efforts into Georgia and North Carolina, knowing their weakness with the black vote, and probably expand their opportunities in the Rust Belt to just kind of get a very narrow win. And so I think that Vance, I think that the Gavin Newsom campaign wouldn't really put that much resources into the Sun Belt. And that's why you get such a lopsided win. Arizona would show up as a 9-point win for Vance. So he'd continue to improve on Trump's margin in the state. He'd probably win Maricopa by closer to 7. And you'd see Pima and Santa Cruz probably get under 12 points. So that would be a huge shift. And then Nevada comes up as almost an 11-point win for Vance in this one. It's almost in the safe Republican column, but it is still in the likely column here. The only explanation I could see for this is Vance probably winning Clark County by like 4. Like, that's the only explanation. And Washoe would probably even flip to Vance. Like, the whole county map would basically be completely red except for Washoe and Clark. He'd probably win Clark by maybe 4 to 6 points and Washoe by like 3. That's the only explanation I could see for this map being the case. And then at that point, when you look at the rest of the states there, I'm pretty sure that is all of the likely Republican states. It's just the Sun Belt states here. And when you look at the Democrat ones, you see Colorado is, probably about an 8-point win. This is an 11-point shift from 2024, a 3-point shift, from 2024. And this is mainly because of Hispanic voters trending a little bit to the right in this one, but with college whites also trending. But the Hispanic shift and the non-college white shift boost the state enough to actually put it somewhat in the 8-point column, looking more like 2016 Colorado than like, a 2020 Colorado, for example. Even New York is actually more competitive than Colorado. It's only an 8-point win as opposed to an 8.5-point win. The state voted for Harris by only 12.5 points in the last one. I think Vance would be able to narrow that up a bit. Illinois, you kind of have the same thing. I mean, Harris won it by 11. Vance is only losing it by 9.5 points here. Connecticut, 11.5. Rhode Island, just a 9-point win for Gavin. That's really not that great. And even like Delaware is like a 10-point win. Like, those margins are really not what Gavin needs in order to win the Electoral College here. And even New Hampshire, like, this is basically the toss-up map between all of these. These are all of the toss-up states that are essentially up for grabs. And this is very simple. I mean, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are all in the lean column. They are all within the 2 to 6 point range, with Pennsylvania almost being in the likely Republican column. It almost ends up being above 6 points, but it is within the 2 to 6 point range, with Wisconsin once again being the closest out of the three. And we even see, that is pretty astonishing, in terms of the margin of victory here. That is a pretty, groundbreaking margin of victory here. And we see Minnesota 2-point win for Gavin Newsom. Virginia, the same thing, 2 points. So you see these states shift like 2 to 3 points to the right. We see New Hampshire, still be a 5-point win. So it still swings away from Vance in the election by 2 points. I think it's the only state that actually ends up shifting away from Vance in the hypothetical matchup. And Maine at large would also be like a 3.5-point win for Gavin. So those states are not really going anywhere. The fact that Gavin improved in the white college areas definitely explains why New Hampshire would end up shifting to the left, as well as like Minnesota and Virginia not shifting as hard to the right as like you would expect it to. And then you have the two tilt states here, with New Mexico being almost a 2-point win for Vance, so it's almost in the likely column, but it just barely ends up, flipping to Vance here. And this is the state Vance picks up from the last election. And then New Jersey is just a 1-point win for Gavin, so within the 0 to 2-point range is a tilt state. And the final map here shows Vance with 317 electoral college votes to Gavin's 221. As voter registration trends come in New Jersey, I would expect this to already flip red in the scenarios. So I actually think Vance with 331 is probably more realistic than even Vance at 317, but we still have to wait for more voter registration data to come into the model as this expands over time. And so I hope you guys did enjoy this analysis of the 2028 election and how Vance would easily beat Gavin Newsom in a hypothetical matchup. I will see you guys in the next video.